What are the reasons for gender disparity in education? Why is it that there are more boys that get to school than girls? Why is it that more boys tend to hang on and continue and finish education than girls? Why is it that more boys tend to move from primary to secondary to higher secondary to tertiary education than girls do? Let us look at some of these reasons. The first one is poverty and absence of free and compulsory education for all. Now, the Constitution provides as a basic right free and compulsory education for all school-age children. That has not happened, and it will take a lot of time and effort and doing the right things to get to free and compulsory education. As we saw previously, that even when education is free, when parents don't have to pay the fees, and even the government steps in and provides free textbooks, parents don't send children, particularly girls, to school because of other hidden costs. We've already looked at that, and we're not going to look at that again. And poverty comes in and plays a role. When parents struggle, especially where only the father is the working person, only the father is the individual who brings money home in terms of a salary or whatever, and the mother is at home doing the housework, looking after the children and the family, one income is not going to make it. So, poverty, and especially families that are still today living below the poverty line, are not going to be able to afford to send their children to school, even when the education is free and free textbooks are provided, because there are other hidden costs like transportation, uniform, food, exercise books, copies, stationery, and those kinds of things that parents don't have the money for. And unfortunately, as I've said earlier also, it is in these low-level economic strata group where the families tend to be larger also. So population needs to be controlled. A lot of effort has to be made even by the health department to try and educate these families that having fewer children will allow you to send your children to school, will allow you to bear the additional hidden costs of educating a child. When you have 2 children versus when you have 5 or 7, it does make a difference. So poverty, and unless poverty can be alleviated, unless these people can be helped, unless both the mother and the father can bring in a salary, this is not going to go away, even with free education being provided by the government. Poverty continues. Household income remains low, and therefore the household continues to be unable to afford to educate girls. Households prefer to educate boys because they somehow in their mind think that it is the boys that in the next generation will be responsible for raising a family, will be responsible for earning a livelihood, will be responsible for fulfilling the needs of the family, and therefore educating boys is seen as an important thing to do. Girls, the position is very different. Girls will get married, they will work in the home. Why do they need an education? That's changing and should continue to change. Girls need an education. Imagine the difference in a household where the mother is educated and another one where the mother is not educated. How do you make sure that all our mothers of the future are today receiving an education? Because that will make for a better Pakistan, a more prosperous, a more constructive Pakistan. Second is low education budget. Every year when the budget is announced, education gets a stepmotherly part of the budget. With low education budgets, it is not possible for schools to raise their facilities, for schools to increase salaries of teachers, for schools to provide equipment and materials to students. And with these things not possible, it is not easy to bring about massive changes in education. If we want more of our boys and more of our girls getting to school, we will have to make sure that there is a decent allocation in the budget for education expenses. On an average, the expense in the budget is about 2% of the GDP. This doesn't say much for a nation that needs to educate its young population dramatically. Third reason is cultural norms restricting freedom of movement of girls and women. Culture plays a part. Yes, women are not allowed to leave homes, not allowed to go out on their own, not allowed to mix out in public. And so this mindset needs to change. This can happen in two ways. One, of course, is by educating young people. And the second is by changing the mindset of the parents today. When parents begin to see the benefit of young girls going to school and the benefit it makes in the lives of the families they will be raising, I think they will be more open to allowing their girls to go out into these areas. Also, the government needs to step in, provide schools closer to residential areas, especially in rural areas, so that girls will be allowed not only to go to school as students, but also be allowed to go to school as teachers. This limits the movement of girls and often prevents them from attending school. Infrastructure, roads, the distance of schools, and these kinds of things do not help our young girls get to school and receive a decent education. 4. Gender division of labor. This is another major reason why there is disparity in gender among our students. In Pakistan, as in many other countries in the world, there is a clear division of gender roles. And this does not help our female population. The female population is seen as a group that should work at home, do all the housework. The male population is seen as a group that should do all the work outside the home. Does not benefit anyone. When girls tend to be kept at home and are told to stay at home, then obviously the question is, why do you need an education? If you're never going to go out, if you're never going to work, if you're never going to contribute constructively to the development and progress of the nation, why do you need an education? If you're to stay at home, then you stay at home even now. Not a good sign. 5 is shortage of schools. Of course, the number of schools is not enough. We need more schools, particularly in the rural areas. We need more schools even in the suburban areas. And certainly we would also benefit with more schools in the urban areas. Now, where are these schools coming from? Unless we increase the number of schools, thereby increasing the number of classrooms, we will not be able to accommodate the extra students that would like to come to school. So many times in certain areas, young children are led away from school. They may get to school, but the head says, sorry, my class is full. I don't have space for even one more child. Where is this child supposed to go? Especially if this is a girl child. The parents are not sending the girl child, and no mother is walking a 6-7-year-old 2, 3, 4 miles to get to a school. So we will have to increase the number of schools. We will have to make sure that there are schools nearby and that the schools have openings so that all our young girls and boys also can make it to school. It is important for girls' schools to be easily accessible, as girls are not permitted to travel long distances, particularly on their own. And even if the mother is willing to walk the girl to school, it's not going to happen. The father won't provide it, won't allow it. The grandparents tend to interfere, and so on and so forth. So we will have to make sure that this works out the way it should be by getting more schools. Then, of course, as we've mentioned, shortage of female teachers. Girls will be allowed to go to school if there are girls in the school as teachers, heads, principals, whatever. We must do whatever it takes to recruit educated, qualified, trained young women into schools as teachers. And this we will have to make it a definite effort to be able to get there. Rural parents particularly. You see, more so, our major issues with female students happen and are relevant in the rural areas. Not to say that urban area is free of it. It's much less. It's much more rampant, much more prominent in our rural areas. Conflict. Ongoing conflict between various groups in parts of Pakistan has compounded the issue. This is the safety and security issue. Over the recent some years, we've seen this as a major threat to education. How do existing schools make sure that they are safe and secure for their students and, of course, the teaching staff? In addition, schools with scarce resources, scarce budgeting, where enough money is not sent, the school is not able to invest in safety and security measures. So unless we can make sure that our schools are safe for our children, many parents will think twice before sending their young people to schools.